There it is.
Yeah. Hello. Tonight we're coming to you, the 98, with a special interview with actually a fraternity brother of mine, Scott Lyons, who is a professor of exercise science at the University of North Alabama, and who has both an MA and a PhD in human performance. Scott started with his bachelor's degree in history, like I did, but unlike him, I stayed in history, and so he's had a much better time, getting a useful job than I have as Dave Schell, the professor. So what I'd like to do is ask Scott to, start off. We'll introduce ourselves, and then we'll be asking Scott various questions that we got from some of our viewers on our podcasts, and pretty much going from there. So, Scott.
Sure. I am Scott Lyons, and as Dave said, professor of exercise science at the University of North Alabama. I did all of my schooling at the University of Alabama 20 plus years ago. Spent 17 years at Western Kentucky University and just completed my second year at the University of North Alabama. So I'm about to begin my 20th year in the field, and my primary areas of research are cardiovascular physiology and environmental physiology. Anything else you'd like me to say?
No, that was fine. I'm sure some of this will come up. Ryan?
I'm just an amateur arm wrestler. Maybe not even an amateur arm wrestler. Go ahead, Paul.
All right. For those of you who don't know, my name is Paul Linn. If you're in the sport, you may already know that. Just a little background on myself outside of the sport. I did get my undergrad in exercise science and my master's in exercise physiology. Then went on to continue, when I was playing football, continued to play football at the next level beyond college. And then I found arm wrestling at 35, and I've been blessed enough to be able to achieve championships at the state, national, and world level. So that's kind of where I'm at now at 42, and I'm looking forward to this opportunity to be able to pick Mr. Lyons' brains on, maybe some advanced stuff that would apply to our little niche sport.
Okay. And Paul actually started as a young pup. I started in arm wrestling at age 66.
You're like the only guy who gets to say that. You're like the only guy. I started at 35.
Well, and so, I'm, of course, considerably worse arm wrestler than Paul, but somewhat better than Ryan. But, of course, he hasn't won any matches at all yet. And I've won about, 7 or 8% of mine. So, having said that, why don't we, get the comedy behind us and get started. So, Paul, why don't you start off by, asking Scott, something.
Well, I feel like, you said like when this topic came up with Mr. Lyons, it was based on stamina. And I have some general questions based off of that. I know you guys may have discussed it. So, I mean, for those of us who've dug into the idea of human performance as a whole, sure. You're going to know that, a lot of your endurance / explosiveness is going to be hereditary. Some of that can be manipulated through training. But I guess my question to Mr. Lyons would be, in such a finite sport where only a certain finite amount of muscle groups are being used, like taking it back a step, from the idea of, you're either fast twitch dominant muscles, or you are slow twitch, red or white fibers. And then the people that are in between in the fog and gray fibers. So in a sport where you may only use one limb and 4 dominant muscle groups, is there any difference in the ability to manipulate that fast versus slow twitch and endurance versus explosiveness?
That's a great question. We know that. Okay. I clicked my mouse. I want to make sure I didn't screw anything up. Okay, good. So you kind of packaged a little bit into one question there. So with upper body and really one limb, as you said, is their ability to to affect the fast twitch percentage, right?
Yes.
Well, as you already said, the percentage of fast twitch, slow twitch fibers is highly, highly genetically determined. But we know with training that fibers can be very, what's the word? Malleable, maybe.
Yep.
We can take on different qualities. However, that's primarily with 2A fibers, like gray fibers, as you said,
Yep.
and which are fast twitch fibers, but they're fast twitch oxidative fibers. So they're fast twitch fibers, but they also have some characteristics of slow twitch fibers, of more aerobic fibers.
Right.
And they're more trainable. Those 2A fibers are more trainable to become more slow twitch, more aerobic in nature.
Okay.
You can do sport specific training as much as you want to, and you can get some trainability of your fibers to take on more fast twitch characteristics, but the body doesn't prefer to do it that way. I mean, you can get some trainability of those fibers to take on a little bit more fast twitch characteristic, if you will. Now, the literature is very inconsistent on that. I will say that. Okay. Now, we know the literature is very consistent on the trainability of those fibers to take on more aerobic qualities with more aerobic training. But the other direction, what you're talking about, taking on more fast twitch characteristics, the literature is pretty inconsistent in some ways. And so my answer to that part is going to be, apparently we can do that to a certain degree, but not tremendously. So your genetic predisposition, your muscle fiber distribution that you basically have that's genetically coded is pretty much what you're going to have. I mean, it is what you're going to have. And you can take on that trainability. You can do that to a certain degree going in the fast twitch direction, but it's just not as the body doesn't prefer that as much as it does going the other direction. Does that make sense?
Okay, yes. So, and that's what I wanted to know. I'm geeking out a little bit because this is a big time topic, right? We have a lot of people talking about, I can't be explosive. Right. I can't be fast. So I train it with bands. So in arm wrestling, you got people they set a little, like some type of recorded go, and they try and work on their hit. But the reality is there's there's speed, like acceleration, and then there's timing. In my mind, you can improve your timing on a go, how to time things, but your actual true explosiveness, based off of what you're saying, is not as trainable. So if you are an explosive person, you have a better chance of building your endurance than a slow twitch person building explosivity.
Yes, I would agree with that statement. Yes. Now, when you say timing, I know what you're saying. I would look at that as reaction time. Right. And what's the best way to say this? I think about like velocity of muscle shortening. Now I'm going real heavy muscle physiology here, right? Sure. The maximum velocity of shortening of a muscle fiber is greatest at the lowest force. I mean, we know that it's the maximum velocity is greatest at the lowest force. So I would say that somebody would probably do really well, especially if they're not as explosive, so to speak. Work on their reaction time and their timing, right? Working on that reaction time to try to get that advantage, to take advantage of that maximum velocity of shortening to get a jump on the opponent. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, let me dig into that a little bit more. So when you're saying like as far as explosiveness goes, you are going to be the quickest, the fastest, without a lot of force added to that muscle belly or those tendons. So like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, when you talk about the explosive arm wrestlers in the sport, most of them are going to use a dead load, meaning there will be no pressure. So as the hands close, most people are going to load pressure right then, statically, really hard static pressure without moving their arm or elbow. To me, that is the negating of a fast twitch person.
Right.
If I load them, they can't hit. But most of those fast twitch guys are able to force a dead load and have basically a fish grip, and then wham. And what if I'm tracking what you're saying, it means that you can be fastest without more force loaded to your muscle.
Okay, you're using some terminology with which I'm unfamiliar. I mean,
Yeah.
specific to the sport. So when you say a dead load, you're talking about before the go.
Before the go, if I'm able to just be soft and gentle.
Okay.
And I hit the go 100 miles an hour.
Okay.
Against no force at the beginning.
Sure.
Or if I'm loaded, meaning I'm like, lat tucked, you know. I know personally I'm faster on a dead load.
Right. Well, and I think that speaks to kind of what I was saying as far as the maximal shortening velocity.
That's what I was trying to dig out.
Right. Yeah. I think we're talking the same thing here, because I think you get that speed of contraction, especially with an explosive type 2X fast twitch fiber, that you're taking advantage of the power that is inherent to those types of muscle fibers, and you're between reaction time and that maximal velocity that you're getting from a dead load. I would agree with what you're saying. I mean, that's the way I would. I know nothing or very little about arm wrestling, but that's probably the approach I would take if I was coaching.
Okay.
Maybe we shouldn't tell anybody these secrets.
No, listen, it comes down to hard work. Let everybody know everything. You got to outwork me. You got to outwork.
And so this is something I brought up last week, which ties into this. And Paul, maybe you can attest to this. A lot of the Europeans seem to be faster. They hit harder or they hit faster. And that's what we were talking about. Like maybe they train differently, or maybe they're not loading up like we do. And you've pulled some of them. So maybe you see what they're doing over there to be that fast.
Well, I mean, so I can explain the difference. In rigid WAF rules, the referees don't allow as much of a load. So like when you're in ref grip, if you move your hand back the slightest, you're getting fouled, and they'll foul you out and they don't care. If the rules are looser, you can apply side pressure, back pressure, rotational, like pronation pressure. You can apply whatever you want as long as it's subtle enough. And like, I think that's the thing a lot of people are missing. If you are not a fast guy and you choose to dead load with a fast guy, it's a death sentence.
Right.
You must load them. And it doesn't mean that you have to become a reactionary puller. You still can load and also initiate. You're just, as Mr. Lyons said, you're not going to have your maximum explosiveness.
Right.
Through that.
Well, and I'll throw something else in as well, because I was talking about shortening velocity, but that and power are two different things. And maximum power is generated at about 1/3 of maximum shortening velocity. So what am I saying there? If these people are loading up before the go, then if they're loading up and they're already at a lot of tension, then they're probably doing themselves a disservice as far as using the mechanics of the muscle, basically the physics and biomechanics of the muscle to their advantage. Does that make sense?
Well, explain to me how they're at a disadvantage by doing it.
Well,
so like,
because they're probably maximum power generated at about 1/3, like I said, of maximum shortening velocity. So if they're already loaded up, then they've already generated enough tension in the muscle that they're probably not gonna reach a high level of shortening velocity anyway, because they're already at a high level of muscle tension.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, but therein lies the counter to the hit. So if I can reach that 30%, or maybe it's slightly beyond without gassing and
Sure.
and blowing my muscles up, or getting too much blood in there.
Right.
If I can be at the go for a short period of time with enough tension to reach my maximum power, the chances of you being able to hit me outside of 10 or 2 is going to be lessened. So to me, scientifically, these things are adding up.
Right.
Like, why do you want to load versus dead load? And what percentage do you want to load at? That 30% number is really interesting, because there's no instance where you want to be 100% loaded, because you're just gassing yourself out.
Yeah. I would, that would not be, that would not be a good strategy, because if you're 100% loaded, you're already accumulating hydrogen ions in the blood. Yep. You're already accumulating ADP. You're already accumulating reactive oxygen species and inducing fatigue in the muscle. I mean, that wouldn't be smart at all. I mean, I'm sure some people do it that way.
Oh, the interesting next level to it is really when you talk about it, when it comes into like the mind games and the aspects of strategy in the sport. The most predominant arm wrestler that we have, Devin Larratt, is a master of forcing his opponents to load and gassing them before the go, taking as much time as he can, getting out of the setup, forcing that setup to be as long as possible until they gas, because he is vastly dominant in slow twitch fibers.
Okay.
And has incredible endurance genetically. And I've talked to him about this, and he's talked about like explosiveness to me. He said, there's in my 30-year arm wrestling career, I have not found a way to increase my explosiveness. However, this guy arm wrestles more and longer and more frequently, to the point that it would be detrimental to any of us outside of him. He overtrains to the point that I can't even fathom, and still performs at an incredibly high level, which is why I say he's the exception, not the rule.
Yeah, that he would definitely be an outlier in this type of sport with that kind of training. That's going to be an anomaly for sure.
Yeah, he will go to a practice or a tournament, and of course, everybody and their brother, who many of whom grew up on the sport watching him, wants to grip up with him, and so he will go steadily for 6 hours. Absolutely, and without stop. It's just amazing.
Interesting.
Wrestling.